Welcome to part 3 in our series of Loving Well. We began, if you haven't seen any of them, you can go back to episode 1 where we defined what love was. And we looked at 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 through 8 on what love is according to Scripture. So that is our focal point on all of these lessons that we're going through of defining what love is. In our second episode, we looked at how do we love well through conflict. So if you haven't seen that one, you can go watch that one too. So that's part 2. And this one is going to be, how do you love well when trust is difficult? So we're going to look for our passage today at Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. And when I start reading it, you're going to go, oh yeah, I've heard this all my life. But we're going to read it anyway because there are nuggets in it that we need to adhere to and grab onto and trust. So Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths.
That's like the top 5 favorite verses.
Is it really?
Yeah. Because to me it's so the question today is, how do you build trust in your relationship? Because it's difficult. And so as we were discussing what to share, the first thing that we would point out is you're absolutely right. It is difficult to build and maintain trust in your relationship. Therefore, you have to be drawing from the reservoir of God's grace when it comes to trust. So you need to be in a trusting relationship with God. And I think the more you're into that relationship and deeper and growing and maturing in that relationship, you'll notice you have a capacity within your relationship with your spouse that you wouldn't otherwise have. Because you'll begin to experience a God, an eternal God, who loves us, whose mercies are new every morning, whose grace is unending, who has sacrificed heaven's best on our behalf. And there's this trusting relationship that he has with us. He trusts us with his grace. He trusts us with his love. He trusts us with these different things, knowing that he's going to be hurt by it. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things, say things that we shouldn't do or say, but he does it anyway. And so I think when we choose to trust the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understandings, but in all our ways acknowledge him, and then he'll make our paths straight. I begin to redefine my capacity. I begin to redefine trust, and then that shapes and reshapes my heart as I lean into that with God, because he widens and broadens my capacity to trust someone else, and how to trust that person. So I think as we answer this question, I think that first thing is you need to increase your capacity to trust, and the way you increase that is by accessing the incredibly deep well of God's grace. Mm-hmm. Second thing, do you want to read the second thing?
Mm-hmm. Trust is difficult to earn and easy to lose.
Yep.
So
I think we know that, right?
Yeah,
and so
I think you can work really hard and really have a good deposit and clipping along, feeling really well, and then something happens.
Yeah, and it's like in the previous video we talked about how in a relationship trust is like a bank account, or you make investments into this relationship, and when there's conflict or bad things happen, you make withdrawals. And so but it's like anything in life. It's harder to build something. It's harder to create something than it is to destroy something. Destruction's super easy and it's super fast. So I think we recognize that, but I think it's important to recognize that with trust. And I think it's okay to say that hey, this is difficult to trust them. And part of it is like, yeah, because you're building something. Because you're creating something in that space and in that relationship. You're creating a capacity maybe you didn't have before. I know in our relationship, both directions, there was things that we were hesitant to trust the other with. It had nothing to do with, there's things Bethany didn't want to trust me with, not because of anything I did, but because of stuff that was in her past. And vice versa. There's stuff that I was hesitant to trust her with because of stuff in my past where I had, wounds and unresolved things. And so, as you're married, those things become evident. They become exposed to one another. And so over time, you begin to realize, man, in order for me to trust her, or to demonstrate and build that trust, this is getting hard. It is, because you're building something. You're building something good. You're building something worthwhile. You want to read the third one?
Mm-hmm. Healthy trust operates with healthy boundaries. Well, I will say one of the burrs in my saddle through the years, not all the time, depends on what gaming platform is out and what hot video game is the one to beat, depends on one of the irks that we have together. And we've had to learn through the years that if he wants to play video games, I'm given a window of time and I know when he's going to play video games. So these days it kind of looks like him going in and going, do you need anything from me? Is there anything I need to help you with? Do you mind if I play this game for an hour? And then I'm far more gracious to go, yep, I'm doing good. Or I have one more thing and then I'll be good. And I'll go do this while you do that. And so if I didn't think he cared about what I thought, that would not be pretty. And if I didn't like that he asks, it has gone sideways in the past. But trying to be open, agreeable, giving, even when I could care less or would rather have the time looking deeply into his eyes. Like this, for an hour. That would be great. But, take what I can.
Because, this is within the context of healthy trust is built by healthy boundaries.
Yes, and so, keeping your word.
In keeping your word. And so this is something we've learned the hard way in a variety of things. This is just a really easy example for her and me. I had some examples for her, but we weren't allowed to talk about those things. So, but with this, it was because it would turn into, hey, do you care if I play video games? And she'd be like, no. And she's thinking I'm going to play for an hour. And then 2-3 hours later, because it's a Saturday or I don't have anything, I don't have to go to work tomorrow or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And so we recognized over time that you have to articulate what the boundaries are going to be. So I'm going to do this for this period of time. Or one thing we talked about is, like, if you call your spouse and you say, like, hey, I'm on my way home, I'll see you in a bit. And it's a 15-minute drive, but then your spouse doesn't pull into the driveway an hour later. There's questions of us, why did a 15-minute drive take an hour? And then there can be points of conflict that come out of that. And there's a withdrawal of trust that actually takes place in that time. It might not be a big withdrawal, but it's just kind of one of those things of like, oh yeah, they should be here in 15 minutes, but they're not. And so those little things, those kind of little micro transactions of trust that are, 50 cents here and $1 here and maybe $2 there, don't seem like a lot, but they add up over time. And so when you create healthy boundaries and you communicate those boundaries, hey, I'm on my way home, but I'm going to swing by the store first and pick up a few things, so I'll be home 45 minutes to an hour. That's a different conversation than, when you come home and you're like, where have you been? I had dinner ready a half hour ago. You said you were going to be here, you're on your way home, and I know it's a 15-minute drive, and it turns into all of this stuff because the boundaries weren't articulated. And I know that might be a different way than a lot of us have maybe thought about or discussed boundaries. And I know boundaries are an important topic. But I think one of the ways we can improve building trust and make it less difficult, it's still going to be difficult, mm-hmm. is to be really clear with our communication. So if I want to play, a new game, hey, I want to play my game tonight. Is there anything you need me to do that would get in the way of that? Or if I, play it, can I have a solid hour doing that? And I've noticed, like, the more I do that, she's usually pretty cool with it. She usually comes up with a list of things that she hadn't thought about prior to that evening. But that's the trade-off, right? That's the exchange we make with one another, because I want to enjoy the game. At the same time, there's things that she may want me to help tackle, and so I'm willing to do that. And that could go the opposite way with us too, right? There's things that she comes to me and says, hey, I want to do these things, and so we have to talk about it and negotiate to a point of agreement.
Mm-hmm. So that wraps up our third episode on loving well through trust. So join us for the next ones. If you haven't watched the other ones, go back and watch those too and give us some feedback. Thank you.